Lockjaw, the Destroyer, and even Dormammu make appearances in our best decks roundup for Marvel Snap this week. Let's go ahead and dive on into what's working after our latest set of card updates. We kick things off with my Jeff's picks this week, featuring a Dormammu Werewolf by Night deck with a small clutter sub package. The basic idea here is relatively straightforward. Dormammu gives us a guaranteed 0 energy skill that can allow us to jump the werewolf around the board, even if we don't meet the condition on it to merge something into the 7 energy play. But thanks to Carnage as well as Misery, this deck is capable of making a deal and summoning a massive stat line. This also works pretty cleanly with Werewolf by Night, a card that often struggles to put up big points in the second lane where your werewolf isn't present, kind of having synergy on both halves, solving an active problem that Werewolf occasionally has, while also giving us synergy with the dog directly. If you're looking to see some games with this sweet deck, be sure to check out my daily deck uploads linked in the video description down below, where we had a sweet set go up with it from my live stream earlier this week. Moving into our high potential category, Spectrum Destroyer is back from the past with one of its namesake getting a whopping 2-point power buff. With the Destroyer rapidly approaching an infinite sized stat line, this deck is back once again ready to juke your opponents, making them play around both Spectrum, powering up the entirety of your board, but also the Destroyer, plopping down big stats in another lane. You can either Cosmo to suppress the Destroyers on reveal directly, or Armor can protect your ongoing path that's nice and built up, so that way the Destroyer doesn't blow it away for you. This deck list has pretty solid stats and a few hundred match sample size so far at Untapped. It's also another that I've got games up with on my highlight channel after the latest OTA. This deck list is also pretty budget friendly, with a handful of higher series cards, Goliath, Sam Wilson, and Captain Carter easily exchangeable for other cheap ongoing cards such as Lizard and Luke Cage. Lockjaw got an extra point of power in our OTA, and this high potential deck list is putting up some solid stats in a smaller sample size so far. You could swap out things like Electro, Jubilee, or even Doctor Doom for hopefully something bigger out of your deck list, such as Galactus First Steps or the Infidel. This deck list is also leveraging the 3-card lockout combo of Storm into War Machine into Legion to stop your opponent from playing on the last turn of the game. Electro downside also gets overridden by War Machine letting you play cards without restriction. After our latest OTA, folks are revisiting a number of the classics with this incredibly straightforward and entirely lower series Ultron Patriot deck, putting up some solid numbers so far. Basic idea is you just jam Patriot into Khazar, into Blue Marvel, into Ultron, spread those bots across the board, and they all have 8 points of power, making it difficult for your opponent to keep up with exactly what you're doing. The deck list also has a dash of disruption with Cosmo as well as Scarlet Witch, letting you mitigate some location variants, and then Onslaught kind of gives you that 1-2 punch at the top end, where sometimes your opponent's going to be playing around Ultron, and then you slam Onslaught, allowing you to power up the stuff you already have on the board, giving you a drastically different point output range than your opponent was expecting. We round out our high potential category this week with a disruptive move-based deck. Cosmo, Mobius, as well as Juggernaut headline Sam Wilson, Captain America, ping-ponging Batroc around the board, scaling up himself as well as a copy of Craven. The Thing First Steps makes a cheeky inclusion here as well, in tandem with Madam Web, the Ghost Spider, and even Hellion in some of your games, leaving your opponent doubting where exactly you're going to be filling your location and what he's going to be breaking and where, making it more difficult for them to play around by needing to fill up the right spot. Moving into our top performing archetypes, these are ones that have been consistently putting up results in Marvel Snap for a number of weeks. We have the end of turn Disruptive Shell headlining this week. We see that similar core to the high potential like which we just looked at with Mobius and Juggernaut being ways to disrupt your opponent, with Stardust in the mix here still as well, despite its nominal haircut down to 6 points of power. If you're looking for a deck list that's both difficult for your opponent to disrupt and has a chance in every matchup thanks to its tech cards, this looks to be the go-to shell for that in our current metagame. Mr. Negative remains the consistent deck list, putting up stats week in and week out yet again, despite Mystique no longer being drawn by Jane Foster the Mighty Thor after you invert with your negative. This archetype is still one of our top performers. This build is slightly more popular, but there's also a Wong variation as well that's putting up solid metrics to boot. With Killmonger going back to deleting all the ones on the board, Destroy is making an appearance in our top performers for the first time in a while, with a couple of new cards making a splash here as well. This build is both the most popular and the most successful, featuring Moira X, a way to get an extra copy of Deadpool or Death, or even letting you have 2 copies of Null, thanks to X23 letting you play one a turn earlier. Moira is not the only new card making an appearance in top performing Destroy decks, though, with this build featuring Dormammu at its top end, also putting up some solid stats as well. It'll be curious to see, as the shiny new card paint wears away, which of these 2 variations ends up being more popular and powerful. Deck and Discard, featuring Bullseye as a key enabler, still an ever-present top performer and consistent threat. The standout thing to note this week is it looks like Bastion was more of a flash in the pan rather than good, with builds featuring Grandmaster or other discard cards in that utility slot being both more popular and powerful based on the numbers we have on the public tracker. Colleen Wing's small haircut down to 3 points of power doesn't really look to have stopped this archetype from being the powerhouse in the metagame that has been for a little while now. Moving on up from a high potential deck list to a top performer this week, the Pixie Annihilist Valkyrie amalgamation is once more putting up solid metrics on the Untapped tracker after our latest OTA update. And I think that makes a lot of sense that this archetype has had staying power. It kind of ticks all the boxes you're looking for in a powerful Marvel Snap deck. You've got really solid linear draws with Sentry, Annie, and Ultron, allowing you to put meaningful points on the board. And you've got really powerful disruptive elements with Mobius letting you go toe-to-toe with things like Negative, and then Shadow King and Valkyrie letting you kick down your opponent's bigger numbers in the games where they might try to go over the top of what you're putting on the board. Another upgrade from high potential to top performing is this Living Tribunal move variation, having the strongest performance among different move decks on the Untapped tracker this week for another week in the row. If your opponent is not interacting with what you have going on, this deck list makes an absolutely massive Human Torch thanks to Sparky allowing Hercules to go into overdrive, and then Living Tribunal lets you take that power and split it up across the board thanks to Magic, Crystal, and even a copy of Blink, fishing up our deck's namesake. This deck list is really good at doing exactly what it wants to do every single game, and in the small number where things don't quite come together for you, you just go ahead and move on to the next. If you'd rather play Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of Marvel Snap, or at least a deck of those sizes inside of Marvel Snap, the Thanos Aero Kang amalgamation, featuring a bunch of different ways to break your opponent's stuff, is putting up solid metrics as well in our metagame that just has so many different things finding success thanks to Marvel Snap's excellent balance. Last but certainly not least, different Silver Surfer variations are solid choices and definitely a top performer in our current metagame as well. This is definitely the best core for playing Viv Vision, our current season pass cards. If you're looking to knock out weekend missions, I would recommend these 12. Unfortunately, her buff up to 3 power hasn't yielded her success in any non-Silver Surfer decks as far as untapped metrics go or my own anecdotal personal experience. Over the course of this year, Marvel Snap really feels like it's done what every card game is always trying to do, and that's have a really consistently diverse and well-balanced metagame. All of the top performing archetypes that I covered in today's roundup have single-digit play rates on the Untapped tracker, with a lot of them being in the 2 to 5% rate. So while obviously anecdotes, you can hit the same thing a couple times in a row because that's just the way variance goes, overall the data on the back end looks like everything is phenomenal after our latest set of OTA changes. As always, if you want to see a number of these decks in actions, make sure you check out the link to the daily deck highlights in the video description down below. As always, I would love to hear what decks you've been having success with so I can consider checking them out on my live stream at some point in the not too distant future. I appreciate everyone that made it all the way through to the end of the video. Remember to smash the like button if you enjoyed today's roundup and subscribe to the channel to not miss any that we'll have coming up in the future.